Okay. All right, folks, we're going to get started here.
Crossfire here.
I want to introduce our speaker for tonight. His name's Philip Adair. Philip got interested in flying while working in the farms during the Depression era and jumping off things. He also started building model airplanes when they just drew an outline on balsa and he had to cut them out. He joined the Air Corps in 1941 and started to learn to fly later on. He was assigned to the 89th Fighter Squadron 80th Fighter Squadron of the 89th Squadron, where they trained in P-47s, and then that's what they thought they were going to get. But when they got to the Pacific Theater, they ended up flying P-40s. He served with the fighter groups for a while. And then he served with the 56th Fighter Group for 5 years, where he flew P-47s, P-50s, F-80s, F-94s. Their group was well known for their maintenance, and he became their lead maintenance officer while still being an online pilot. And because of that wonderful distinction, he had the honor of going over to Taiwan for a while to help them with their maintenance. And while there, he started training their Taiwan pilots how to fly combat in their fighter jets, and he was honored by the Taiwan government because his training brought down 2 Chinese fighters during that time period. Eventually, he left the Air Force after 30-some years and retired in October of 1971. So that's the quick rundown. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Philip Adair for our presentation.
Well, a little bit of history first I'm going to bore you with. I'll try to get to it in a hurry. I grew up during the Depression on a farm. We weren't poor, we just didn't have any money. Maybe some of you can relate to that. I think that most people that live in a 3-bedroom house are accustomed to having 2 bathrooms. Well, ours wasn't exactly like that. We had 3 bedrooms, but we had 2 paths. One path went to the well, and one went to the outhouse. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have a telephone. The paper came out once a week. So there wasn't a lot to do except work, but there was plenty of that. I graduated from high school in 1937 at the age of 17. Since we didn't have any money, I couldn't go to college. But on a farm, we had a nice big flat field. We were 20 miles from Post Field at Lawton, where they had artillery spotting planes, 35 miles from Shepherd Field, and they had something which you probably never heard of, was a Bell Aerocuda bomber. Had 2 engines mounted way up here. They were Allison liquid cooled engines. Well, they liked our farm for some reason. There weren't any telephone poles around. The fence posts weren't any more than that high, so they liked to come over and buzz the place. There was one guy from Fort Sill that I swear I could look him almost in the face and see his eyeballs sometimes when he came by. He got so close. Well, when I graduated from high school, couldn't afford to go to college, so I thought, I'd like to fly airplanes. I've been making models for a while anyway. So I get the bright idea and I go up to Fort Sill and finally find some second lieutenant up there. I tried to get his attention. He wouldn't even look at me. And finally, without moving his head, he said, "What do you want, Sonny?" I said, "How do I go about joining this outfit?" He still didn't look at me. He said, "Go get 2 years of college and come back and maybe I'll talk to you then." He might as well have said, "Go to the moon." Well, in 37, the only kind of work you could get around was labor. And the pay was either 25 cents or 50 cents. Now, you might think that was an hour, but that was all day. And you brought your lunch. I couldn't see much future in that. So when I got a chance to go to Wyoming and take a job up there for $15, I thought I was really into all the cops. Now, that wasn't $15 an hour. It wasn't $15 a day. It was $15 a week. And I worked at that pay scale for 4 years. During that time, I managed to wangle a CPTP scholarship where they were teaching civilians to fly. I actually got 2 scholarships. To make a long story short, after finishing the second one and getting the third one, I was supposed to go to work for Plains Airways after I finished the third one to go to work as an instructor. Well, the second course ended on 30th of November 1941. Guess what? A week later, everything changed. All of a sudden, the Air Force said, well, maybe we don't need 2 years of college. If you can pass the physical and our written exam, we'll take it anyway. So that's how I got in January. I went to aviation cadet school, Calo Field in Ontario, California for primary and basic. Luke Field for advanced training. I graduated there in August the 27th, 1942. I was assigned to the 1st Fighter Command at Mitchell Field, New York, and then from there to the 80th Fighter Group and 89th Squadron. I reported in there on the 9th of September 1942, fresh out of flying school. They had this monstrous big airplane up there, P-47. Now, most of you have been close to one or seen pictures of them. It's quite a big airplane. Going from a smaller airplane to that was quite a change. So, reporting on the 9th of September, after I checked out my gear, 5 days later, I climbed into one of those monsters, and I'll never forget it. I was wearing one of those OD wool flying suits, and it was a fairly warm day, and I was already sweating. And to taxi that thing, you have to move the nose back and forth because you can't see anything ahead of you. And you have to do it with the brakes. Well, I finally got it on the runway, lined it up, poured the power to it. And before I knew it, I was in the air. Got the gear up, and I thought, oh my God, I've got this thing airborne. How am I ever going to get it back on the ground? Well, it turned out it was a nice flying airplane, and it was no sweat at all. It just came into it and landed with the tail wheel lock, is no problem. Well, we trained there from September of 1942 until April of 43, and we had been told that we were going to Europe, to England, as a matter of fact, to fly against the German Air Force. And we were pretty sure of that because we'd already checked out our airplanes and tested flown them. I had already flown mine, knew I was going to get it. They had about half the stuff loaded on the boat. And in the middle of the night, the group commander got a telephone call. At 8 o'clock the next morning, we're on a train headed from Hempstead, New York to Byrd Field out near Richmond. Most of you know about that place. Well, when we got down there, General Arnold met us there, and I was quite impressed. He's really a principled fellow. I didn't like what he did to us, but he's still a principled fellow. Anyway, he said, you all have been selected for a very special assignment. I can't tell you what it is. You're going to have to travel under secret orders. But first you've got to check out these P-40s. Get familiar with them. And then you go back to Mitchell Field and see what happens then. Okay, so we checked out in the P-40s and terrorized the city of Richmond for about 4 or 5 days. Flew under the bridges and one thing and another. Not under it, but almost. But anyway, when we got back to Mitchell Field, they stuffed us on a troop ship, a British troop ship, Mauritania. The 9th of May, we pulled out of the harbor. 52 days And 3 ships later, we dropped anchor off of the port, if you want to call it a port, at Karachi, India. Still didn't know what we were going to do. The ship couldn't come in close enough to shore, so they had to pull a barge up next to it. They shoved us up on the barge, stuck that in as close to the shore as it could. We got off and waved ashore. That's how we got to where we were going. I was beginning to think I was in the Navy. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I have a brother who spent 26 years in the Navy. He was on the Enterprise all during World War II until after. And later on, I flew the PBY-5A. As a matter of fact, I was current in the PBY-5A in 1955, 1956. That's after the Navy quit flying. Anyway, they shipped us some P-40s over in Crete. We assembled those, and in August of '43, I left with the first contingent on our way up to where we were going, which we knew by that time was the Assam Valley, and we knew what we were going to do. Some of you are probably aware of that long war between the Japanese and the Chinese that lasted from 1937 till 1945. Well, the Japanese had chased the British out of Burma. They chased Stilwell out of Burma. They took over the Burma Road, and they took over all of Burma, bases and everything else. So there was no way to get supplies up into China anymore. So the scheme that they had was to take stuff over by boat to Calcutta, take it by rail or boat up to the Assam Valley, and this is the Assam Valley up in this area here. China is over here, Calcutta is down here. This mountain range averages from about 15 to 23,000 feet. So those poor guys flying the transport, they had to load on fuel to take them over, bring them back, plus the supplies that they had to carry, and some of the worst weather you can possibly imagine. Well, the Japanese didn't make it easy for them. They were operating off of bases like Missional right here. They would fly over into the Salween River Valley, fly up the river valley and look up and say, hey, is there any guy up there? And they go up and shoot down these transport planes, unarmed, struggling, trying to get over the top. It was a hell of a job for anybody to have to do. So our job became one of flying off of these bases, flying up to over the hump area, and flying what we call a racetrack pattern up there. We kept that sucker manned from daylight to dark every day when the weather was good enough. And we kept quite a few transports from being shot down that way. I tell you, you had to admire those guys that were flying those transports across there. Well, that went on for quite a while, and by about October, we said, hey, the Japanese are flying off these bases down here. Why don't you let us go down in the valley and see if we can't work over some of their facilities? So finally they said, that's not too bad an idea. Well, the P-40 range is just about like that, about 150 miles, where you can fly out without any external fuel, do a little combat, turn around and get home without having to walk part way. So we started working over their bases. They didn't like that. I don't know why, but they didn't like it. So what they did was they started coming up with some of their bombers. And the first one that came up into this area came up to Fort Perks. That was on the 10th of December,